Hey, so for something just a bit different, I'm going to talk about a trip I just made to London. So this is sort of a non-political video. That's why I'm saying something a bit different. A quick word about the quality of my videos insofar as volume and so on. A number of my subscribers have pointed this out, and firstly, I apologize because it must be a little bit annoying to watch when there's issues like that going on. The thing is, I've checked my volume settings and it's all at max. I'm not really sure what else I can do. I think the problem is this laptop just doesn't have the same audio system as my old laptop did. It's a smaller laptop, and there is a speaker, but for some reason it just doesn't seem to be as strong as the other one. So apologies for that. I'm not going to get a new laptop anytime soon. I can't afford to. So this will have to suffice for now. All I can recommend is put your volume up. Um, Maybe use speakers if you want to watch my videos. I mean, I appreciate all my subscribers, and a number of people have said kind things about my videos, but with the caveat that it's a pity that there isn't. There are these problems. So I don't know what to say because I've checked everything that seems to be causing the problem, and I'm not quite sure what else I can do. Anyway, with that said, London. Want to talk about my recent trip to London. Um, I haven't been to London in 6 years, and I really wanted to go for my birthday a few months ago, so I've made this happen. I've went by Grand Central, Sunderland to London directly, only stopping at a few places between York is the major stop, but there's no stops between York and London. Um, Ticket wasn't particularly cheap; it was £98 return, but it's an open ticket. Um, which I know to a lot of outsiders, the UK can seem like an expensive country to travel in, and that's true. We are quite expensive compared to other countries. But anyway, overall, I had a very good experience. I've been to London numerous times before. This was probably about my 13th visit to London, roughly speaking. But like I said, I haven't been in about 6 years. The last time I was there for was for New Year's Eve 2009, 2010. Anyway, just to go through some of the things that I saw and done. My first stop was Highgate Cemetery. Um, this was a bit of a walk. The nearest tube station to Highgate is Archway. Highgate's station itself is probably about the same distance, but Archway is lower down in terms of altitude, so Highgate's at a higher level. Um, it's probably about a 10-15 minute walk to the cemetery. There is a small charge, £4 to get in, simply because it's a world famous cemetery. Got some very famous people laid to rest there. But I went specifically for one reason, and that was to find the tomb of Karl Marx. Not that I'm a socialist, I'm not, but just sort of sheer historical interest. It was featured actually in the film High Hopes by Mike Leigh, which depicts a working class couple, and there's one scene where they are in the cemetery, and the main character sort of looking up at this and obviously admiring it because he's a socialist, and talking about how he was a giant of thought and so on. I mean, whatever your views on communism, it's irrefutable that Marx was one of history's great thinkers, and it's quite an unusual thing to be just standing there knowing that one of history's great thinkers is just lying there. So I find that very interesting. And it's relatively easy to find within the cemetery. Although it's a big cemetery, it's clearly marked on the map that they give you, and it's quite close to the entrance, so it's easy to find. There's other communist leaders around that sort of section. I didn't have time to visit the Egyptian crescent, the Egyptian arch area, sort of a crescent shape, and very peaceful place as you'd expect from a cemetery. Um, it's a pity I didn't have time to see more, but it's not going to go anywhere, so I'll return to that. I was staying in a youth hostel in North London called the Arsenal Tavern. I'm going to write a review on TripAdvisor. So nothing I'm saying here is inconsistent from what I will say there. If you do stay in a hostel like that, I would just recommend it's not the Waldorf Astoria. It's only £18 a night, so by London prices, you pay for what you get. Sharing with 8 other people, they kind of when you arrive, they give you the option to buy your own lock. Um, Apologies, I've just got something playing in the background. They give you the option to buy your own lock, and well, uh, it would be a bit foolish not to. The locker is downstairs, which is a little bit disconcerting, but I didn't have any problems. You put your stuff in, and that's that. They also give you your own linen, which you need to return the next day, but they provide breakfast. I mean, it's DIY, but they provide that. It's included in the price. So overall, I've no complaints. It is what it is. The nearest tube station was Finsbury Park. It's about Actually, Arsenal Station itself is probably slightly closer. Both of them are about 10-15 minute walk. Um, then I went to meet my brother. We met up for a drink, so on and so on. Um, then I just went to Leicester Square because I fancied seeing the West End. The next day was very eventful. I went to Trafalgar Square, impressive as always. One thing about London, people always say it's very expensive. Well, that really does depend. I went to the Cafe Nero's at Trafalgar Square and I was really expecting it to be quite pricey, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that it was the same price as more or less as Sunderland. Maybe a little bit more, but I think I paid 2.50 for an Americano. That really wasn't as much as I would have expected, and it wasn't ridiculously busy, given it was a central London location in the morning at Trafalgar Square. I've been in coffee shops in Edinburgh that were busier than that, so that was a pleasant surprise. The only thing disappointing about Trafalgar Square is all the pigeons are gone. I guess the council brought in rules about feeding them and that sort of drove them away. It's a pity, but that's the way it is. But Trafalgar Square is a very impressive place. They have the fourth plinth, which at the moment is occupied by the skeleton of a horse. They change that, I believe, every 6 months. Um, the four big lions, of course, around Nelson's Column, very impressive. Then I got forget which line it was. I think it must have been the Northern Line, southbound. Um, Quick word about the tube. If you're not used to London, um, it is important to know that there are different zones, and you need to be aware of which. What I recommend is take a good look at the tube stations on the map. There's maps at every station. Try and know where you're going. I didn't use an Oyster card. I was only there for 2 days. My brother told me that it's a case of topping it up, but what I used was just an all-day ticket, which is £12, which isn't that cheap. Um, I don't know if there's a cheaper way to get an all-day ticket. The problem was when I was buying the ticket, it only gave me an option for zones 1 to 6, whereas I was only within zones 1 to 4, so I didn't really have any choice but to pay for the all-day ticket. And in some of the smaller stations, the offices aren't open, so that's a little bit of a downside. I think there must have been a way to save money rather than paying £12. On the other hand, I did use the stations all day. If you're in central London, the chances are you'll be using the tube all day. So on one hand, it isn't cheap. On the other hand, you will definitely use the system very abundantly. Um, Pretty much every major site has a tube station close by. I can't think of any site that has a tube station more than 5 minutes away. So that's one big advantage. Um, it's relatively straightforward compared to some systems in the world. Certainly, I would say it's more straightforward than Paris, the Paris Metro, or the New York subway. I can't say it's more straightforward than Shanghai because I found Shanghai pretty easy to use. Um, I've been in a few transit systems around the world. I found Paris more complicated simply because their system is they also have the zones, but I don't know. It's not a sort of northbound and southbound system. They have an entirely different zone, and if you're in another zone, it's not that easy to get back. So I find it a bit more complicated. Um, I haven't been to the New York subway, so I can't speak from personal experience. Anyway, I got the tube from Charing Cross which is the closest tube station, to Trafalgar Square, to London Bridge Station. And London Bridge Station, I went up the Shard. Now, if you only do one tourist attraction in London when you're there, I recommend the Shard. It's not cheap. It's £30 for a standard adult ticket, but it is some of the most spectacular sights you will ever see. Go to the top of the Shard. Basically, it's a skyscraper. The reason it's called the Shard is because, like all of London's skyscrapers, it's kind of nicknamed depending on what it looks like, and it looks like a shard of glass. It's that'll just get something interesting. This just really shows what it's like. It's the tallest building in London, tallest in the United Kingdom, one of the tallest in the European Union. And I cannot find it. Oh, here we go. So it's 1,016 feet. You can just see different London landmarks over the years, which have consecutively got taller. Nelson's Column, 1843, 169 feet. St Paul's Cathedral, 1710, that's earlier, 365 feet. Big Ben, 1858, 316 feet. Tower Bridge, 1894, 213 feet. The London Eye, 1999, 443 feet. The BT Tower, 1962, 581 feet. The Gherkin, also known as 30 St Mary Axe, 581 feet, 590 feet, 2003. One Canada Square, 1991, 771 feet. And the Shard, which opened in 2012, 1,016 feet. In world terms, it's still relatively not that tall compared to some Chinese and Middle Eastern skyscrapers, but in world terms, it's about 50th or 60th, I think. Um, but by European standards, it's a very tall building, and the views from the top of that are fantastic. Very professional reception. I really do recommend that. Another good thing is the waiting times are not that long. We're talking at the most 10 minutes. And I went like in the afternoon time, so maybe it's because it was November. Maybe in summer it would be a lot busier. I don't know, but I was happy that I'd done it. After that, a bit of history. I went to Leighton Cemetery in East London. I happened to be interested in the Jack the Ripper case. I went to St Patrick's Cemetery. Not a tourist attraction. It's completely, quiet place, but I found the resting place of Mary Jane Kelly, who was actually the last of Jack the Ripper's victims. So just because of my interest in the case, I then went to the site where she was killed by Jack the Ripper. It's now a complete open building site, but in 1888 it was Dorset Street and it was lodgings. So if you're interested in the Ripper case, that's well, you'll know what I'm talking about. Finally, to Marble Arch, which is the scene of the Tyburn gallows. Um, I would have eaten there at the Tyburn Wetherspoons pub, but I didn't have time. So anyway, that was my trip to London. Really pleased I went down there, had a very good experience. Then came back to Sunderland to find out that Tyson Fury had won the World Heavyweight Championship. So as a boxing fan, that was big news for me. And I'll make another video about that. But anyway, that was my trip to London. So I'm making this video simply to give a little bit of an introduction to some people who may be planning to visit. If you don't know much about London, feel free to ask me. I know it relatively well. I know the lines of the London Underground quite well and so on. Feel free to ask. And thanks for watching.